Have you ever thought about becoming a live streamer or using video for your brand or to grow your own personal brand? Today, we're going to learn from one of the leading experts in how to get started with video content. Find out more coming up next. This is To The Point, and I'm Eric Mitchell. Today we have a great show for you. I'm honored to bring back an old friend that I've known for a number of years. I've always followed him. Amazing content. Was one of those people that at first I was a naysayer about, like, no one's going to use live video. Our guest was one of the first people I ever saw pick up his camera and really go live and see it affect his audience and grow an audience and literally grow a brand from next to nothing to one of the most sought-after speakers in the tech sector, and Fortune 500 brands knocking at his door daily to work with him in his amazing work. This isn't like he doesn't have some stellar background of working at Apple beforehand. No, he actually worked as a contractor, working with our military in the cyber defense sector. So it's pretty badass. Fits into so many categories that we talk about here on the show. Now, I'm excited to bring our guest. Our guest is the one and only Brian Fanzo. Known to his large following as iSocialFans, Brian has famously coined the phrase, push the damn button, which takes you from being afraid to just getting out there, leaping in and just getting going with video. Now, a lot of you have asked, how do you get started using video? You need to use video. You see it everywhere. Social media is the new platform. While mainstream media is how we get a lot of information, more and more people are coming to social media. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. If I'm missing one, I apologize to all the social media platforms. Pinterest, there's so many out there. And using video is so key. Well, today, Brian is going to share, number one, his story, so you see where he came from. And two, how you can jump into the game and when it's right for you and how to overcome the excuses that'll hop into your head to start doing it. So, buckle up. It's a fun ride. Let's get to the point with my good friend and futurist. I love that he has that's the dopest title that we've ever had on the show. Futurist Brian Fanzo.
LifeFlip Media, the voice of the warrior class. Are you a veteran or patriotic business owner, author, musician, public speaker, or entrepreneur? Are you ready to take the next step towards success? Then look no further than LifeFlip Media, the voice of the warrior class. LifeFlip Media is the #1 veteran-owned PR firm in America. We use our mission-oriented approach to secure advertising and media exposure for your business, your brand, and your products. It's time to let LifeFlip Media put you on the cutting edge of success. LifeFlip Media, the voice of the warrior class.
Welcome to the show, Brian. How you doing today, bud?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Should I call you Brian, or should we go with iSocialFans, as everyone knows?
Oh no, we're Brian. We're long past that. We don't. I used to say like Brian Fanzo, better known as iSocialFans. I dropped that too. Like let's move on for that.
The artist note. We're just gonna turn you into a symbol like Prince. That's what we're gonna do. I don't know what will make it. A hat? I don't know. A Steeler hat. I think that's your trademark.
There you go, hat. I'll take it.
Steeler moniker has to go there. As I told everybody before we brought you on, you were my first guest ever on something so far ago, so long ago, it feels like a Disney show or a Star Wars, Social Hangout. You were our first guest, followed by Ted Rubin. It was you and Ted Rubin, which always makes me laugh because if you look at the way that show went, we had some amazing guests, but you were our first, so it's only fitting in our first 4 months on air that you come on as a guest. So
I know that seems like forever ago, because it kind of was probably.
was.
But yeah, it's fun to see that and kind of come back and not only see where things have gone, what's changed, what hasn't, and I'm excited to be on.
Heck yeah, and I love it because you have grown so much. Because like I've told people off camera, the first time I was around you in person, which was an amazing event, social media marketing world, when it was in a hotel and it wasn't at the convention center, and we were all at this amazing hotel. And I tell this story where I was sitting at a bar just hanging out because everybody went to these private dinners, and I was like a nobody. And here I am. Guy Kawasaki sits down next to me. We have a long chat, and we end up doing some work later on. But that's the first time I met her. And then meeting like Jay, right? Like Jay Bear, who to me is like one of my favorite people. And he's just sitting there just having a conversation like an average Joe. And of course, now look at where Jay's at. I mean, even at that time, he was huge. But you kind of were the guy running around with Meerkat. And people are like, right now there's people going, Meerkat?
Yeah, what's
what the hell is Meerkat? Brian was the first person I ever saw use go live. And I probably made a lot of judgments on it, which was funny because I was like, I'll never go live. I don't want to be in front of a camera. That's not what I do. And now I like live in front of a camera. And I think that's a good segue to all the things that you do as somebody who I look at as and I hate coining this, and you're probably cringe, but you are a thought leader in this space. You are definitely an influencer. And just pushing the damn button. And so many people now, 2020 has turned you into needing to be live. Video is the way to go. You see it everywhere. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You have to be on social. I mean, even TikTok. And I know that's a difficult subject for so many. But being on video, you're kind of the guy who said, get in front of the camera and push the button and just be comfortable. And get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So what made you get into this? I mean, your background is not in social media, which is crazy. So talk a little bit about your cool background that ties you in with the veteran community, because you did serve in the green zone. You weren't in, but you're part of us, a contractor keeping us safe. So kind of tell how you went from a tech job to being one of the biggest thought leaders in the social media space.
Yeah, so it is an interesting, and for me, I worked, I did 9 years working with DISA and Department of Homeland on the cybersecurity side. So I did, 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. At the time, I had been to 54 countries, pretty much almost every country that had a U.S. military base there. And, a lot of what I was doing was deploying a cyber tool and SharePoint at the time. And my job was really to get the different branches of the military, as well as the government, to collaborate and share policies. So if you think about it, like in that sense, SharePoint ended up being its own social media. My job was to get people to share different, elements of that. And then the more I would work in that kind of space, in that arena, we would also kind of tie that into, okay, how do we connect remote people with what's going on at CENTCOM or wherever it was that we were kind of building out our network. And so for me, and it's actually funny you had mentioned Guy Kawasaki. When I graduated college, and was focused on computer science, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And about 7 years into the government gig, I realized that role of a technology evangelist, which is what Guy Kawasaki was for Apple and Steve Jobs, was really what I wanted to be. And I realized at the time, cybersecurity was, on this crazy height of exploding, but I wasn't loving cybersecurity. I loved the element of collaboration and connecting people. And so for me, that's where that love for collaborating and connecting. And I always like to put it out there, in 2011, people are like, how are you not into 2011? Social media wasn't a thing or a job or a life-changing, right? We just the concept of what we were doing in 2011, 2012 was so different than what we're doing today. And so, I went and worked. I got my dream job of that technology evangelist, working for a data center, and they put me on in the marketing, I'd say side of the house in our company. And I started working with as kind of the face of the company, speaking at large events, doing a lot of the demos, and the marketing side of the house kind of made sense. And I loved sports, of course, born and raised in Pittsburgh. And I had used Twitter since day one, but I was using it to connect with my friends and family in Pittsburgh that were still Pittsburgh sports fans. And for me, it was kind of one of those things oh, I can do that for business. And, the aha moment came for me. I was actually a couple months before Meerkat, was, November 2nd, 2013. And it was something my mom said, actually. My mom was on the phone with me, and she's like, Brian, one of the things that made you stand out in everything you've ever done was you were unapologetically yourself, and you would, wear your hat. You'd associate with the people that you wanted to associate with. You wouldn't just, kiss butt to kiss butt. You wouldn't tote the line if you didn't think it was the way to tote the line. She's like, I hope you're doing that in social media. And of course, I'm not going to tell my mom she's right. So I was like, yeah, of course, Mom, that's what I'm doing. And I got off there and I was like, man, I spent, I'd spend the first 3 years from 2010 to 2013 hating social media because I was trying to put out what I thought people wanted to hear from me. And on that time, I kind of changed. And I said, you know what? I'm going to tell my story, talk about my experiences, and I'm just going to put it out that way. And the thing that I had probably going against me is I didn't like writing. We did have Google Hangouts and Google Plus. And so it was really, luck. The last week of February, the first week of March of 2014, live streaming came out. And it was just kind of like real, raw, push it out to your network, no BS, kind of live in that moment. And I was like, that's me. And it was kind of like the medium that fell in the right place. Like if live streaming had come out a year earlier, I don't know if it would have been my thing because I didn't discover the difference between trying to say what you think people want to hear online and then really just telling your story and being yourself online. And there's a gray area of bragging and there's a gray area of, self-promotion and wannabe thought leaders, wannabe influencers. But, for me, I take pride in, this will be my, 5th straight year with, 6 figures of revenue directly off of influencer work. Right. And that's based on a community and, social following that I've built, and my full-time business is keynote speaking now. And it's funny because a lot of speakers in the, the COVID world are coming to me like, dude, how are you getting this influencer work? I'm like, 7 years of building a community on social and, that's kind of what it's done. It's not the stages that I spoke on that side. So for me, and it's, really interesting because a lot of what I did in the government time working with the military, right? I was deploying, let's context, right? I was deploying cybersecurity tools before cybersecurity was a specialty, before anyone was graduating college with that. So people would come in my class. I remember being in Iraq the second time, and there was 2 people that stayed after class, and they're like, hey, I really want to learn, I need you to help me with these definitions. And they were asking me, they were I think they're maybe 19, 20-year-old Army, and they were asking me very basic questions. I'm like, guys, I'm teaching you a very in-depth cyber tool. What happened? And he's like, so on my paperwork, I put that I knew iTunes. And they're like, we're going to put you in with cyber. And I was like, it was a moment for me that realized, holy crap, and he was joking. He's like, but everyone else that joined with me, they couldn't even tell you how to use a computer. He's like, the fact that I knew iTunes made me, and I'm giving them literally a tool that can control the drone network over the green zone, right? Every time we would tell people, there are buttons that you will press that could bring down the entire network. This isn't, and so it was one of those aha moments for me, and I love, it's a day I remember very clearly because we stayed up till well after 1 a.m. and I taught him everything that I could imagine, and every day he was working hard, and it was, a little bit of context too, where since 2010, let's say, for me, a big thing was helping people see the power of telling your story, putting it out there, using video. But I like to say, I'm not a live video expert. I'm a person that realized live video is the best format for me to put my message out there. And I love explaining how I do things, right? And there's such a difference in that space. So I have no problem talking about live video. I have no problem, helping people use it. But I think, for one of the biggest parts for me is that, I was always one that was loud and had a story to tell and loved helping and teaching. Live video and social media just happen to be the great vehicle to make it happen.
I love it. Great answer. I think that's the best answer we've been given over what people do for a living. Most people don't have a good explanation, but yours, and it's funny you talk about the military and just taking jobs because I think that's pretty accurate still to this day, but it's funny the time you're talking about is probably one of the worst times we've ever had in combat especially in that area, and that's when Stanley McChrystal was around and came in and made all those changes. So I know what you were doing was key because he's written about cybersecurity and all these things nobody knew about because nobody was communicating, the left wasn't communicating with the right, and that went from our spec ops all the way through your contractors, which is hilarious, right? I mean, even Buck Sexton, who's a radio host now, he was a CIA analyst, and he said the same thing. And I'm like, we're talking about the mightiest military in the world. Hands down, nobody argues that. But we bring in top-notch guys like you who know what they're doing, and we have SEALs and Rangers and Delta and Recon. Oh my!
Yep.
And nobody could get their shit together, and people are dying, and I'm like, that dude knows what he's talking about.
Like one of the number one like missions was, at that time was like we didn't have no idea what the total number of connections to the NIPRNet or SIPRNet was in the entire, and so it wasn't even a matter of like, how do we secure it? Like, we just want to know what's on the net. Like, it was such like a sprawl, right? And then like, I remember being on Bahrain, and working with the Navy there, and we were doing this, it was a JFCOM deployment, and it was a really innovative piece. And then I went home, I believe I went home for a couple of weeks, and then it was my second trip to Afghanistan. And the things that we were working on in Afghanistan, they weren't even aware of what we were doing in Bahrain, and not only aware of it, but like the machines. It's definitely an interesting time. It's also one of the things, it had me appreciate, adoption of technology. Coronavirus, like people came to me like, Brian, like this is what you've been preaching forever. I'm like, I know, but here's the scary part is like people are now being forced to change, which I've wanted people to change for years. But being forced to change isn't really a great thing either, right? Because when you're forced to change something, you're going to hate it for a long time. Right. And you're going to blame it for the reason that things suck. But I think there's also a beauty in eventually seeing the light. But that's part of the problem for me is, I would say I have more leads right now than I've ever had, but I also have more tough conversations with people that aren't ready to do what they think they're ready to do. And it's definitely, it's definitely a interesting limitation in the military and government. But I'd also make the argument that the places where innovation are going to happen the most in the next couple of years are going to be regulated industries, healthcare, financial, military, because you don't really have to unscrew a lot of the stuff that the rest of the places have been like randomly deploying, right? Like being behind the curve for some part of this, because everything's going to be reinvented post-COVID, I think it's going to allow for a lot of innovative change in spaces that probably never would have thought of it.
That's so true. You know what's funny, and I thought of you right when once you saw COVID was a very serious thing. I know in February we were told only 15 people have it, and by then it'll be fine. We know that's a lie, because 130,000 dead Americans and 3 million positive test cases. Yeah, I guess that 15 didn't hold up. I don't want to go down that road. I can spend a lot of time on that subject. But you have always talked about video, and, I work in the media. I do a lot of, that's how part of my career is based off that. And it's funny how virtual or remote was so frowned upon. Even for you guys in the speaking tour, there was no way. If you would have told me a year ago, hey, if you're going to get paid as a speaker, you're going to go in your house and have a virtual stage. Like you, who've been showcasing your new set. It looks great, by the way. Your set that you're showing on Twitter. If you would have told me that, I would have laughed at you. But I think of you every time now as I'm on the phone with, executive producers and bookers, and they're like, we just need to make sure your Skype channel's good. If your clients are going on, make sure they have lighting. And people are out there actually taking your gear list. And of course, Owen Hemsmith, another amazing person. And, Vincenzo Landino. You're looking at these guys who you looked at before. You're like, they're amazing business owners, but I don't know why I would have a tie-in to work with them and why they're giving this out advice. And now you're like, oh, shit, I better bookmark what he just said because I'm going to go back and use it. And it's amazing. You guys have been on the mountaintop yelling, this is the future. And now everybody's like, yep, it's the future. We're in Zoom meetings, Skype meetings, StreamYard, Ecamm. I mean, there's so much technology that we're all learning how to do basically on our own, becoming producers of our own. When we used to think podcasts and, oh, Lord, Google Hangouts. We both remember those as two guys who had shows on these things.
Yep.
And now look, this is the way even the networks are doing. So let me ask you this. What do you see as the future? What's next? You're always the guy who's ahead of the curve here. Now we're all streaming and doing lives. That's, the Fanzo way, the iSocial way. What's next? Where's the game going that takes it up a notch? Because there's no way we're going to sit here and just kind of chill out in this way.
So I think that's an interesting one, right? I think we're still in a broadcasting live video mode or broadcasting video mode, right? Very, even a Zoom call for all intents and purposes. I don't care if there's 30 people on it. More often than not, it's one or two people on that call that are leading most of the conversation, most of the things. So we're still living in kind of like the one to many relationship where it's one person talking to many that's hopefully talking to many more. I would argue we're going to go a little bit back in time in the sense of reminding ourselves business-wise that is it better to go viral or be seen by a whole bunch of random people, or is it more important to be dialed in and provide exclusive access to the 30 people that are going to move your business needle, right? So like, I love studying things like Discord, even TikTok. I spent hours interviewing TikTok creators, understanding like how you find your people. And, I think part of the thing with video is like, it's been a year of video every year since YouTube came out. But video has also been very hard and disconnected. And even when we were talking about live video, like it was still like cool, but like, where does it fit in the business model, right? And then now we're forced to do it. And I would argue there's a new appreciation for video, right? Like the amount of people that come to me and are like, Fanzo, like you told me to press the damn button. Like I finally pressed it, but now I realize like, holy crap, it's a lot more than like just, being able to do it and like doing it back to back and doing it multiple days, right? Like, and even like, my girlfriend, she's an on-camera meteorologist for the Weather Channel, right? And so she helped a lot of the Weather Channel meteorologists get on Facebook Live when that originally came out. So we have like that tie, but it's so funny because like a lot of the things that she was helping them do, now everyone was doing, right? Like, I loved watching Kumo from his basement the very first time he's going live, and he's like, why is there a reflection off of my head? And his head was so shiny. And like halfway through, he's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Other people do my makeup. It's not like, because you're so used to like the way that we do things. So like the future, I look at it and saying, like, I think we're going to get to a new spot where it's going to be about like, I wouldn't say closed communities, but being able to broadcast and target and understand like where certain groups are going. But also, one of the things we're missing in this whole virtual space is the co-consumption of content, right? I mean, I'm living by myself. I haven't talked to an adult human since March 7th, which is insane, right? 140 days, because I live in Northern Virginia. My life, I travel about, speak at 60 events a year, travel a little over, 250,000 miles a year. My girlfriend lives in Atlanta, Georgia. So when I didn't have my kids, I would stay in Atlanta at the place we have there. Well, since COVID, my daughters are here, not wanting to get infected. And, because I care and wear a mask and believe in the idea that I'm protecting those that, either don't want to be protected or are in danger, I've separated myself. And man, is it, I'm an extrovert, but I never minded being by myself, but I'm like, hey, it's a lonely world right here, right? And like, I have my daughters on the weekends and a couple nights a week, and they keep me busy. But like, just having someone sit on the couch with me to watch Netflix is what I crave. Yeah. Right? Like, weird as that is. And so when you think about virtual and like the video and like, yes, it's cool that we have a lot of us doing it. And even when we quote unquote get to this new normal, and we figure out, how to get a cure for it, and then how do we deploy that to everyone, and then how do we even figure out who is everyone that is. I'm with you on a bunch of that side of the house on a lot of the things that are going on. But I think as we move towards this future, we're going to re-examine like, why do we have an office, and then like why, like one of the things I've been saying for a long time is like, why does an employee stay on 40 hours a week every week throughout the year when their vital use case is maybe 3 months of the year, right? Like, yeah. I've always said, like, I don't believe everyone should be an entrepreneur. I think entrepreneur is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. But I do believe lots of people would benefit from working at many companies throughout a year, rather than being someone that works at one company and really only provides value during a smaller amount of time. But how do you figure that out, right? We have healthcare and lots of different variables. But I think working remote, working from everywhere is going to open that door, right? Where it's like, hey, like, how do we kind of spread out those resources? And so I look at that as being the future. I also look at it like, I mean, we have to face it. There are communities that have done virtual really well, the gaming community being one of them with Twitch and like that gaming side. You also have the adult industry that has done amazing at growing that side. Like, even if you look at things like OnlyFans on a lot of these adult sites that are out there, their ability to create raw video, create conversation, maintain attention, understand how to play out, outside but inside the lines, where the data value. So I think that's a big piece of it. And I would say that the other thing that I think I'm excited about is that because we are such a divided world right now, more divided I think than we've ever been, partially because we have a divider in chief down the street from me here in Washington, D.C. There is an element where I believe the division is going to get to a point where we realize that if you're only surrounded by people that think like you, look like you, and believe with you, it's going to lead to disaster in multiple areas. So I think we're going to see a lot of blended communities, blended results, where it's not saying it's public, it's not saying it's private, but it's saying like, hey, how do we get a bunch of people that are willing to have conversations in the right room. And so I don't think it's like VR or AR, but I do think it's this like new world where I would call it, video becomes participatory, where it's all directions, not just one direction. And I mean, think about it on your next Zoom call. I mean, it's majority of it is run by a bunch of, and I would also blame everyone that's listening, right? Like how many people active listen on a Zoom call? Not very many, right? And you can blame distractions. You can blame a bad Zoom call. I blame it's, we have to consciously be better at participating virtually, and then we're going to see more value in that space.
I love that because I think, you're dead on. You've been right so far. I'll give you that when it comes to video's the future. And I know I was a naysayer, and now look at me. I mean, I was the same guy who knocked YouTube, right? I remember I was having this conversation with Des Martinez, who is an amazing YouTuber, and I was laughing. We were having this conversation. I told her, I said, Des, I apologize I said, I'll never be that guy who'll put his picture on a thumbnail. Now, every thumbnail I do has my picture on it, right? It's like, I'll never do it. Like, we just hit 500 subscribers, and it's 2 months into our YouTube channel. So I'm really excited about that. Unfortunately, no one else is really excited besides me because they don't understand the power. But I've learned so much about, over the last 13 weeks, I've learned so much more than I thought I knew. Because before, it was like one way of thinking. Technically, for media, I didn't care. I was like, I go on, my clients go on, that's it. And then I created a show, and I was like, well, YouTube's fascinating. And then I would follow what you had to say, and I'm like, I like it, but see, live wasn't like, I have a love-hate with live. I like it.
Yeah, me too.
But then I don't like it because I like the quality, like post-production stuff that you can do with lower thirds and telling people how to follow and subscribe. And there's a lot that you have to do, and people don't get that. But I was thinking of you the other day when this gentleman who lives down the street from you in a house that's white on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Did you ever think that you would have a living, walking, talking, breathing example of what not to do on social media every day to be able to use as an example?
Man, I tell you what, especially because Twitter is my favorite in the whole world. Like Twitter has been my favorite for years, 5+ years. Yeah, someone pulled up a blog post. 2014, I wrote a blog post why I should be the CEO of Twitter, which is kind of funny, like looking at it in retrospect. And I've been very lucky, like Kayvon and a couple of those guys that are executives now at Twitter. I've been in conversations with, and I now realize I would never want that job, even just for the fact to figure out how to deal with that side. It's funny, in a weird way. Like I would always get really upset when someone would blame social media for something bad happening. And I would always say, like, especially the Me Too movement was going on. And I was like, no, bad stuff's been happening for so long, but you've been getting away with it because social media now gives everyone a voice, right? Like, even if you think about it from, you have the Trayvon Martin to, all of these different pieces, like if someone didn't videotape it, none of this would have happened, right? But it's not even, they videotaped it and had the ability to get it out to the world. And we had the ability on free with, we pay with our data, but free platforms to put it out there, right? And so the beauty of these, and I think it's with all technology innovation, right? Like I love being a digital futurist, but I'm also like, for me, the place where I play is I like the people to see that it's the synergy between innovation and humanity, right? Like that's where I like to see this. But with the synergy and with the power of these tools becomes the bad, right? Like you can take every innovation that's ever existed. You can go, you can even go into Uber. You could go in, like, as soon as something was like, wow, you are using this to do this, there is someone that can use that same thing to do something bad, right? And for the longest time, we would see it, like people would blame live streaming. Like people were killing people on live streaming at schools. And I'm like, well, it's not live streaming that enabled them to kill that person. It's just now we're aware of what's going on. And rather than us address mental health issues, we'll blame the technology that was the vehicle, right? Because it's the easy scapegoat. But, like, yes, it's weird. To be honest, part of it is like, I can't believe that we have someone that is in that position in the greatest country in the world and has the audacity and, let's say, freedom and I wouldn't even say ability, like to put out as much and to retweet like a video that specifically says certain things and then to unretweet it and then roll back and say like, I didn't know that it was screaming white supremacy. And you're like, I don't care who you like, it's your job to know that. And it's also like you like with the greatest influence there is. And so, yeah, it's an interesting, it's funny because part of it became like my dad all of a sudden had like appreciation for Twitter because he knew that Donald Trump was on there. And I was like, oh, okay, like cool. And then my dad was like, he just got an account a couple months ago, actually, which is funny. But like for the longest time, he was like the non-logged in Twitter watcher. So he never had an account, but he would go in and like monitor and like be able to search hashtags. And my dad always looked at it as like, I would say conversations, like, where do conversations happen on Twitter? He's like, I see like Donald Trump put something out and then like a whole bunch of replies. And I'm like, all right, Dad, I need you to start following other people and I need you to redefine what Twitter's value is. But you know, like I will use the weird analogy. Like you had like, was it Roosevelt with the radio show, right? Like there was always, you know, leaders getting their messages out and to the audience, and in real time is what is powerful right now. The thing I preach is that anyone, including, you know, someone that doesn't know what they're doing and is dividing our country, anyone can put things out in real time. The people that are moving the needle understand how to put things out at the right time, right? And it's such a hard balance, and it's unfortunate that his example is like there is no right time, because it is. And like, you imagine me on that staff. Like I was on a panel with White House digital team a year and a half ago at Social Media Week Fairfax here in Northern Virginia, and I was in awe. Like I just kept saying, like, can I please not answer any questions, and can I just ask him questions? Because I was like, how do you even, you know, and sports teams are the same. There's a lot of, you know, like, and there's part of it too is like we can't use rules from 2015, like even to your point on YouTube, right? We can't use operating procedures of 2018 on what to talk about and what not to talk about in 2020, because guess what? The world's different. How we talk about things are different. You know, I've said that a lot in the Black Lives Matter conversation, where I've been a big advocate in the LGBTQ community, but I was also very good at being silent advocate in the Black Lives Matter movement, not realizing that my silence was actually compliant, right? And not realizing that there was plenty of times where I could have used my voice. And it's so interesting because now when I look back, and I just did this recently, like some of the things that I was boldly, quote unquote, boldly saying in 2014, 2015 would not be anything close to boldly saying anything right now, right? And I think there is something beautiful to that, like with great power. And I will argue, like, if you look at what Obama did with the election with social media, and then what Trump has proven, right? Like, and I think if you take politics out of it for a second, like I live in Northern Virginia, right? I'm unfortunately in this spot here. There was an element of like not trusting those that were always there, and a massive desire for change and things to be different and things to be kind of disrupted, and like the old white guy hiring old white guys to talk about old white guys to decide policies for the rest of the world it needed to be disrupted. I would argue that still exists to this moment, right? Like we've proven that, like, hey, just picking something randomly, like the guy that was on a reality TV show, like probably not the best idea, but it's an interesting space because I like to look out, let's just say 5 years from now, the next president, like the next election, not the one that's happening this year, but the next election after this one, like the power of social media for us to unite the country and bring people together with someone that believes in that as a moniker, I think is going to be world changing, right? Yeah. It's unfortunate we have to get through what we need to get through in the short term, but yeah. It's an interesting time.
It's funny you bring up election, and I think social, again, I thought of you. It's amazing to watch, and I thought of you in a good way. It's when President Obama was on right after a lot of the riots started in June. And number one, it proved to me I really miss a guy with a bigger vocabulary than 100 words. I felt like when I was younger and my parents would come home and we had a shitty babysitter, and I was like, man, can you come back? Almost crying, like I wanted to go on his stream and be like, just please come back. You left us with the wrong babysitter. She's mean. She makes us drink warm pineapple juice and hot peanut butter on crackers. This sucks. But you bring up a good point with election 2020, and as much as I don't like the man in orange, I'm also equally upset by the way like the other party reacted, because you had so many young, youthful folks using social. Tulsi Gabbard and Mayor Pete, I love both of them, and Andrew Yang. Yeah. The way they use social to reach an audience, it didn't seem fake. It didn't seem like they're trying hard, which so many folks that get on social, it's like, okay, put your teleprompter down. Like, we can tell you don't care. And those guys are, I mean, Andrew Yang holding the camera out and being, shaky arm.
He's my example of everything that every political leader, and part of it too is the idea of like, we talk about humanizing, we talk about being authentic, but there's also like allowing social to live and document with you, like, right? And like this is that point where, and I mean, talking about Yang being such a very fun, like there was an element where you knew him more in 8 months than you knew presidents that were in office for 8 years, right? Which is like and the world, I mean, the United States especially, is craving the idea of like, hey, we want to connect, right? And I think, you know, if something's taught us in the last year, also like the more I've openly trying to, you know, working on my empathy towards, you know, Black Lives Matter and understanding a lot of the things that I was just ridiculously naive to, or maybe I was, you know, purposely naive where I didn't want to believe that were going on. A lot of that also come down to realizing like public defenders and people that are in our local, like the social, our access to these people, even in the small town in Northern Virginia where I live, like I started now, like I've been commenting on our local mayor and our local office that on social media because I want to get to know them, right? And I think if you think about it weirdly, 8 years ago, just the idea that we could without having to go to like a town hall didn't exist. And so there is like this weird vehicle, but yeah, I believe Yang did it. You don't even have to, I don't care what side of politics you're on. The policy that he talked about didn't matter. It's the way that you convey your story. And he allowed people in at a way that, you know, it scared a lot of people, but man, if you are not full of crap and you are a good person doing good things, you take the Andrew Yang model and you will be amazed at the results you can, you know, kind of drive to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think this is the way that we're going to communicate with each other because people aren't in studio anymore. The way that we communicate with podcasts and micro shows. Just last week, we interviewed David Grasso from Bold TV.
Bold TV,
and just amazing network. And you look at Cheddar TV and all these other networks that are smaller, but they're killing it because people would rather digest their news that way. And even small shows, and I'm not going to toot the horn of this show, but even this small show is where people choose to get their lifestyle and find their knowledge and find out how they could do stuff. Because just like David said on our show, it's easy to go look at these big shows who have the same faces every day, pounding the same drum. But people don't want that. People look forward to your podcast and different folks' podcasts out there and different shows like this where they could tune in. They have almost a relationship with us. Like, I mean, you know that with your fans. I mean, they're out there. And you get to build something you don't have, and it's digital, right? It's like this. And then when they see you, I've been around you when people come up and they finally meet you. It's hilarious. It's like you're a Beatle or something. And it always cracks me up because you're so humble. But everybody's humble about it. Like, even Guy Kawasaki, I remember the first time I met him, I was almost like, you know, I felt like Vegas Vacation with with Randy Quaid, like Wayne Newton. I felt the same way with Guy. And Guy
I felt that way when I
laughed.
met Guy the first time as well. I had that exact same experience.
I think I have our photo. Remember we took stock photos?
Yeah, we
with
did.
him?
I remember that. Yes,
I found them the other day. I was like,
oh, that's too funny.
It might make an appearance in
there you go.
video. But it's funny, like we all meet him that way, and it just kind of cracks you up that this is where we're at, and things have changed so much. But we always talk about decades, right? Seems the last 2 decades we have come light years. Just think of an iPhone. Like I was laughing because I have a couple of them laying around the office, and I'm like, wow, remember when we used to use this thing? This was our life, and now it's like, I want bigger. I want bigger phone. I do everything on here, and I found out that this phone has more technology in it than the rooms that filled NASA back in the day, putting Apollo in space, right? Like, this is 500 times more powerful. We can launch a spaceship. Let's go, Brian. We're going to launch a spaceship.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And Elon Musk is like, I got you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm good. So let's talk about, like, a lot of people are getting into the game. And I want, before you go, I want to be able to address this because a lot of people, it's one of the number one questions I get, and I'm far from an expert. I always, refer to folks like you and a few others that I'm like, that's who I lean on for what they do for lives. You and, David Foster and his amazing, his team doing amazing things, teaching people to do live. Like, I know push the button is the social fans thing. I get that.
Right.
But what are like some of your key tips to people who are like, okay, I want to get my small mom and pop shop. I need to compete. I need to get my story out. I'm going to start doing this online thing. I want to do video. I got to do video. Everybody talks about video. How do you get started? What's your kind of, if you were able to tell people really easy,
And obviously, if they want more information, they should call you. But you
Yeah.
gotta make money on this stuff. But what's some advice there?
So the number one I have is access. The word is access. Write it down. We all crave access. We crave access to who you are, what you are. You know, like my dad used to always we would drive by like 3 Olive Gardens to get to like the random hole in the wall Italian place. And I was like, Dad, why are we doing this? Like the food's not that much better. Like what? My dad's like, well, this guy cares. And I can go back there and talk to him and they're going to tell me my story, right? And my dad always, and like if we think about it now, the brands that we're loyal to are the ones that give us access. If you are a great brand doing great things, how you're going to work online is not going viral, not a hashtag strategy, not like all of a sudden becoming, an expert at TikTok, but it's about giving people access into the core values of who you are, right? And so live video allows you to do that very easily, right? You press the damn button, but I think access is the key, right? And then I think beyond that, when you start thinking about it is like, how do I give people access in a strategic way, right? And so like one of my favorite things to do is like behind the scenes. Like we love to see how things are made. We love to see why you do things. Like if you were a storefront, like this is my favorite like examples is like if you're a storefront, right? And this is a tough time for a mom and pop storefront or mom and pop business, but like how do you choose what's on sale? I'm just curious, right? Like, and you know who's also curious about that? A whole bunch of people that are trying to decide if they're going to buy something on Amazon or they're going to buy something from you. And if you start sharing the thought process or the reasoning and giving, like when it was a small company in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I helped them, we would do on Friday nights, we would do like this email newsletter that Saturday morning we were going to go live on Facebook and we're going to give you 5 items to vote on. On one of the 5 items are going to be on what's on sale for the weekend. And they thought it was like this crazy, silly idea. And we had like 9 people the first week and like 19 the second week. But eventually it got to a point where people would come to the store and say, the thing I voted for didn't get picked, but the fact you cared enough to let me vote with what you wanted on sale had me come in your store to purchase something, right?
Yeah.
And it's that little piece of it, right? So I think access, that's why that word access to me is a big one. The other one is like, you don't know what works until you try it, right? Press the damn button is like, I don't want you to press the damn button forever, right? Like I've been joking that I need a new mantra of like, don't press the damn button because there's a whole bunch of people that are just pressing it, like throwing a bunch of crap out there still for years. But like press the damn buttons, like press it, figure out like, oh my goodness, it's this easy. I can do this here. And then once you do that, start using the data to be strategic with what you're doing. But I think far too many people will try something little, fail, and then not use it, or try something and believe like that's the only way to do it. And I think right now, like I would argue, thanks to COVID, it's the greatest time ever to experiment because we're all trying to redefine what the future looks like. We're also trying to redefine how this all is going to work out. And so no one's going to look back 5 years from now and be like, in 2020, you made this mistake. We're like, what? Like 2020 is that year we're going to avoid, like, it's going to be off of resumes. It should probably be off credit reports. It should be the year that like we just like kind of like we give everybody excuse to do, for whatever reason. But I think it's a great reason to try new things, right? Like why not do an every morning 30-minute show where you're telling people behind the scenes what you're going through, right? Like, one of the most successful piece of content I've ever made was about my struggle with ADHD and my decision to, take a break from Adderall and how messed up it made me and how I all of a sudden had a new appreciation for medicine. And I can tell you, I've got hired by Fortune 500 companies to speak in front of 20,000 people. And I will say the reason and they'll say, oh, it was that video, Brian, that you did talking about your struggle with Adderall. And it's like, what? And I know from the outside, you're like, well, how do I get there? And the answer is you can start giving people access and then you lean into what works. And that's as simple as it gets. But too many people are going to use excuses. I mean, the lighting is not right. The timing is not right. My business isn't sexy. If you don't think your business is cool or sexy, it's probably not. But I bet you your story for why you're in it is, right? Like, stop using that as an excuse to not, like, why do you do what you do? What's the problem that you solve? What are the things that drive you to do what you do? And I think there's a way to, I mean, I turned a funeral home. I had a funeral home that I helped use live video for almost a full year. And like the joke was like, he's like, help me create a live video strategy. I was like, cool, I will. I was like, because you know what? The only time people have to deal with you is the worst time of their life. I was like, so if you were able to turn their family members and their people into advocates to understand all the process, I bet you we can make this work, right? And I think if someone like that can do it, like I don't think any business has an excuse.
Yeah, that's true. I think people do make excuses, and I see it all the time. People are like, well, I don't have the right lights. I need to get this. And I'm like, somebody said this funny story. It was actually a guest who was coming on our show, and they're like, I hate doing this.
and they had bad lighting, and they're like, oh, I got to spend a fortune. And I laughed, and I said, do me a favor. Can you just get up and turn around? Because they were telling me where their light was coming from.
Yep.
And they turned around, and they had the best natural lighting ever. And I was like, they're like, wow. I was like, yeah, I just saved you $40 right there from that tiny little ring light that you don't need. If you,
I literally took a light out of my daughter's bedroom the other day because I was doing something from another room in my house, and I took the light off my daughter's bedroom and I tilted the lampshade, and it was perfect. And I was like, don't use that as an excuse. And if for those that are even like the Amazon list that you were mentioning before, like the new thing has been, Brian, like, how do I level up? They're like ring light, web camera, microphone, like the 3 that I'm using, under $500. Like, so like everyone that looks at like excuse, we like look at like, now granted, like my studio, I have 5 cameras and a bunch of stuff going on now, but the primary stuff that I'm using on a regular basis is less than a $500 piece of, setup. And it's the difference between, looking up your nose on Zoom with like bad, like the light from your window coming through, and you have your headphones attached to your laptop so you can't move. $500 and you transform the way you show up on virtual.
And I love you. I always tell people when they ask, like, what's the gear list? And I'm like, there's several gear lists that I know I've built for myself as I've kind of one-upped, right? Started with just a basic webcam, right? The standard Logitech, I forget what the heck it is. The one we all have, right?
The 922. Yep.
There you go. The one that's really hard to find right now.
Yeah.
That's what I started with, and like moving around and using really basic lighting. I think that I had with a green screen, and then you notice once you get comfortable with it, you're like, oh, I want to add, and then you could go get that more expensive stuff. But you're right, for $250. You can actually get little LED lights to light up your office and have that cool backdrop if you want to do what everybody seems to be doing now, which is cool. I love it. I have it in mind, so I'm not making fun.
Yep.
Trust me, it's on behind me. It's on all the time. I prefer it to natural light. And you kind of upgrade, but you really don't need to. I mean, if you go look, and I'll go back, and it's perfect timing, and it's why I always kind of think of you, Trevor Noah, doing his show from what looks like a corner in his house in New York. Jimmy Fallon, talk about an amazing show. And then SNL, before they went on their summer hiatus. I can't wait for them to come back because I thought every week they did something more amazing with pulling out.
Look at the Domino's commercial. The Domino's commercial from their phone, right? Like, I thought that was genius, right? If you're listening to this and still using technology as an excuse, I would argue that you're using it as a crutch because you're still afraid of what's the unknown. And here's the funny thing about that is, like, it's the best time ever. Like, the world, there's lots of trolls and we're very divided, but there's also this idea that we're all trying to figure this out together. And so there's no better time right now this is the perfect time to put yourself out there and try things, because we are pretty damn forgiving, and people will tell you when your audio is bad or your lighting is bad. I mean, I went live on Monday this week, and my networking here was, at least I thought it was my networking, was causing me all kinds of issues. And like, I get brought out as the guy that knows his stuff. And I kept my screen kept going black, and I was having all these problems. And the amount of people that sent me emails afterwards and like, man, it's all good, man. No, don't worry about it. We can't wait to tune in next time. And like, for me, it's like I'm setting a standard. So I think it does a lot of it comes down to there's no better time right now than right now to kind of do that things.
So before you go, let's talk about my favorite subject. I had this discussion with Scott Stanford from WWE just a couple weeks ago. We were talking about trolls on social media. And we all get them. The further we climb up the ladder, the more that they seem to follow along. And they just seem to tell us usually ridiculous stuff with their usually less than 100 followers is when they usually will come at you. They probably don't even have a profile picture. I used to engage with them, right? I don't know why I did it, but now
I remember you used to engage with them.
I loved engaging with them. They're fun. And then I grew up. Unfortunately, I was like an immature idiot, 10 to 7 years ago. And I've grown up now where if they really have to get my goat or say something dumb, and then I'll go after them. But for the most part, I believe it in Scott's method, which is I just say, Aunt Karen or Uncle Dave, did you take the wrong meds this morning? It's amazing how they lose control, and they're like, what? Because that's not even their name. And they just lose control. You just watch them kind of blow up, and you're just like, I'm not even going to acknowledge you now. They usually block you immediately thereafter, and then it just doesn't become fun. Or they just, and Facebook's different. I love Facebook because it's like your friends come to defend you suddenly. And I have the greatest fan base in the world. I got to give a shout out to our listeners and the folks who support LifeFlip and, friends of mine who, when some idiot comes back at me and they just mess with the wrong thing, our most famous one is when we first started the show. You'll love this. I made a comment about the president, about him bashing on at Mattis all the time because he's bashed on General Mattis several times. And this is his first attempt.
Okay.
And somebody came at me and goes, well, if you could do it so much better, why don't you go visit a recruiting office and do something about it? And I'm like, huh. And so, like, my little brother who served in the Corps, all these, a guy who's on my Facebook all the time, I actually went to boot camp, School of Infantry, and the fleet with, pops on and goes, dude, why do you got to go visit a recruiting office again? I'm like, oh, and I'm a trader, too. This is what this
Oh, of course.
Trader, I need to go, I'm like, I got the tattoo. I got my moto tattoo. I got Marine Corps stuff. I'm pointing to a wall that's in my office right here that's next to me.
Yep.
I'm like, no. I'm pretty good. Why don't you settle down? So it's funny. So how do you deal with trolls? You have more followers than me. You post a lot of things that we talked about. Black Lives Matter. You and I both see eye to eye on that. I think it is our place to actually use our voices to say things. I've interviewed amazing folks on this show covering it, from everybody from Montel Williams to Lenny Thomas, who's on BET, does an amazing job for Tyler Perry on Ruthless. Stanley Campbell, retired SWAT. Eddie Clark, retired Marine, retired law enforcement. Amazing folks coming on are talking about Black Lives Matter. And it's funny how some people get really mad at us, and they'll, I've seen the folks who come troll at you with, obviously, no profile photo, by the way,
of course,
with an egg. And they're like, psh, all lives matter, Brian. How dare you say it's? How do you deal with it? Because you get them more than I do, and I usually get them from hitting a hornet's nest talking about the president. But you innocently post stuff, like even when you post your ADHD and your Adderall. And I'm right there with you, my friend. I mean, I have PTSD, and I treat it through cannabis. And trust me, write about cannabis. I still get hired by some of the best companies in the world and the best influencers. Yep. But trust me, there's those people who are like, I can't believe you talk about marijuana like that. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I didn't ask you to do it. I'm just saying I prefer it. It's how I choose. But I mean, how do you deal with the trolls you get? Because you do get them quite often. So I'm curious how you deal with it.
It's not an easy battle, right? Because there is a desire to please everyone, right? And as many times as someone tells you, if you're trying to please everyone, you don't please anyone at all, right? And that's great in theory. There's also a whole idea of crap, I don't like pissing people off. And there was a time, I think, where I was very much in well, if you don't like what I have to say, fine, unfollow me. I didn't make you follow me, right? There's that view on it. I also realized recently, taking that stance on it is a little bit me kind of sometimes I feel like that person does need to listen to me and learn a little bit more. And with live video, weirdly, it's the greatest troll platform ever. Because when someone trolls you on Twitter or your comments on your blog post, they're hoping you have a bad reaction. When they do it on live video, they get to see you have a bad reaction. They get to watch you read that comment and see how you interact, right? And so part of that is having a strategy with live video, having a decision. For me, oftentimes, I will thank you and compliment them, right? Kill them with kindness type conversation with live video. Wow, thanks so much for this comment. Love for you to check out my website and do a little bit more research before you make any further comments on that, right? Or whatever it may be. But there's also, if you're going to ignore, this is that weird spot where a lot of times if you study that whole concept, and there's bad people, so let's throw them out. But there are also a lot of people that just want to be acknowledged or heard. And so a lot of times I'll be like, hey, I really appreciate your point of view. I'll take that in consideration, or I'm glad I now know a little bit more about where you're coming from. And you'd be amazed, saying thank you or being glad for someone saying something will go a long way in kind of disarming that conversation. But at the same time, I've become really good at unfollowing and muting people on Facebook, right? I don't mute people that have a different opinion than me. I actually love people that have a different opinion than me. Yeah. I mute people that spew hate. I mute people that only live in an attack negative world because I don't need that. I don't even want to handle that. So I think that's a big piece. And then probably the biggest lesson I've learned in the last 18 months was that you were saying trolls, but let's put it even a little bit different. Thought leaders or leaders in your own industry. I was oftentimes influenced by leaders of all different places in my industry that I would consider my peers. And they would disagree with me, or they would say something that I was like, man, that's against what I believe. And I would take that to heart. And I started to realize I can be friends with people that are on my level without having to be influenced by their opinion. And I needed to shrink my circle of those that could influence my business decisions, because not everyone wants to do a business the way I do it. Not everyone wants to accomplish the same things I want to. So that was a really important step for me. And it was actually life-changing because now I can have some guy, some leader that's been in the game for 20 years post something on Facebook. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's him. That's what he posted. And it doesn't get to me. Before, I'd be like, oh, my God, I can't believe he said that. I'd type up a blog post. I'd have a podcast reply. I'd be like, I'm going to prove that person wrong. And I was like, what the hell am I doing, right? Like, it's a lose-lose battle. Yeah. So I have like a very small circle now of people that I'm like, if that leader believes in this for this reason, I'm going to do some research to figure out why. And everyone else I'm going to be friends with. We can, have a beer and hang out, and we can, agree to a bunch of other things. But that's been a massive help for me. I mean, holy crap. I mean, Facebook went from being something that would like literally activate me to create a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't need to now I can be very, hey, cool, good for you. Good luck with that. I know what you're trying to do in your business. I'm not going to change mine.
Yeah, I feel you. There's a lot of people who are Facebook experts on a little bit of everything, especially the last 13 weeks. Everyone's a COVID doctor, a civil rights expert, and now military experts. Everything is covered. Everyone knows everything. And I just think it's funny because you're right. I mean, it's just you have to stay positive. That's what I do. And I think somebody 2 years ago gave me the best advice that I've actually used every day of my life. And before I was like you, I was like, oh, really? Let's go. You want to see a reaction? I mean, and trust me, sometimes that Eric comes out, but people don't see posts.
Oh, yeah. There's sometimes that comes out, too. I got no problem with that.
Some people don't see posts. I was just telling my team today, I sent them 2 Dropbox links of what was the opening monologue for an episode. It never made print, but it was a retort to Mr. Tucker Carlson. And it wasn't very kind, I can tell you that. It was very Eric-y, and I was like, oh, no, I got to respect. Again, and I went back to the advice I was given. The advice was this. Don't give people headspace and don't pay rent. And I'm like, perfect, boom. Yeah. I like that because I do. I'm like you. I want to please people. I want people, even when they watch this show, I want them to get top quality, not just from me, but from the guests that are on. I want your guys' cameras to look good and have audio and share it on social, right? And I can't let that stuff eat at me when it doesn't work that way. It's like, it's just, it's part of doing these shows. So I think that's sound advice is basically don't let people, just ignore people. I mean, you can't make everybody happy. And when you realize that, and it's hard because we're all people pleasers and we want to see, when you're a positive person, you want to see positive things happen.
Right.
Some people don't want to live this.
I try to track the amount of time that I spend on a negative comment and counter it by spending that same amount of time on a positive comment. Yeah. And if you do that, you'll be like amazed because you'll get 100 people that say you're amazing and one person that says you suck. Yeah. You'll spend an hour on the I suck person, like researching them, figuring out why they came up with that decision. The 100 people that told you were amazing, you have not clicked on their profile. You don't even, they could be the executive of the greatest company you've ever wanted to work with. The positive comment, we almost cool, and we've all done, and I think that, I started tracking it. At one point I had gone down a rabbit hole, I had that moment of I need to get this out of my head. And I spent probably 40 minutes. And I was like, well, I'm going to spend 40 minutes on the positive. And man, after doing that, you kind of build your own ego and you're like, I need to spend less time on all this together. What am I doing, right? Yeah. I think, hey, we all got the same amount of time, 24 hours in a day, right?
Heck yeah. So before you go, let folks, we're going to put this all in the links and all the fun stuff so everybody will see this. But our folks that are watching us live right now on this beautiful Thursday, let folks know how they can get a hold of you. Obviously, I led with it's pretty easy, and I'll tip it off, but you could do it again just because we want them to play at home. It's easy to find Brian anywhere. You can just use iSocialFans, and that's that. Come on, folks. I've been teaching you guys this for weeks. The @iSocialFans. He's everywhere. Twitter is where you'll most likely find him all the time.
All the time.
That's another question. When we bring you back, I want to go deeper into. You're one of the few guys I know shares a lot of your family with your wonderful, beautiful family that you have. Your daughters are sure growing up. I remember when you were first showing. But I know kids get bigger. People are like, Eric, kids grow, and I'm like, yeah, trust me. I've got an almost 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. I can tell you.
Yeah, say you got teenagers now.
Yeah, they grow. They give us great insight. And we're gonna have you back, and we'll talk about that. But I got to give you kudos. You do that, and I know you're a protective papa bear too. So.
Oh yeah, it's an interesting balance, and and my past life in cybersecurity and privacy and that side, I have had to be a little bit more methodical on that, and actually having a girlfriend that's in the public light and on TV, and kind of exposing to what she has to deal with in her direct messages and the comments and like even like tracking from like locations. And all of a sudden I was like, ooh, I have a whole different view on that. But yeah, that's for another time for sure.
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
happy to go into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I social fans on every social network. I'm on everything. I don't advise everyone to be. And I always tell people like, just pick your whatever your favorite network is. Give me a follow there. You don't have to follow me on every channel. And then I have a new podcast that just launched this month. Or last month, I'm sorry, Press the Damn Button. So press the damn button in any of your favorite podcasting apps. And it's more of an interview show now than I've done in the past. And just kind of walking through people's lives and what actions they've taken throughout their lives that help them become who they are. And then what action advice they give. And that's been a lot of fun for me, that. And then, all my virtual resources, everything virtual, speaking, keynote, all that is over at brianfanzo.com. So brianfanzo.com, first name, last name, pretty simple. But I have, I updated 2 new videos on YouTube a week right now on virtual stuff, just giving away that information free, just stuff I'd learned. The one that went up there today was 5 features that Restream.io, which is one of the tools that are available, why I love that tool. And the one that went up on Monday was like 3 ways to make your video not suck or something. I can't remember what that was. But if you just put in press the damn button.video in your browser. So press the damn button.video, it redirects you to the YouTube page. So if you want to check it out there. So yeah, there's a lot of fun, man. I will definitely come back on, and always fun to, reminisce. Also, definitely interesting times. And I think we all have to, find ways to tell stories and share different views on different things. So I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I want to thank you again, Bud, for joining. I know our audience will be in touch. You are one of the leaders of industry when it comes to, you are a digital event, a futurist. I absolutely always see what you're saying and then laugh, because 5 years ago you were talking about this very stuff that is very much true. So it has to feel really good and rewarding to be a futurist and see you're right, because you could be like you could be like the people who wrote Buck Rogers, because we should be flying around right now and we got lied to.
Yeah, we should fly.
So you're at least you're not the guy who wrote Buck Rogers and we're all like, dude, that never happened.
That's true.
Or the people who wrote Back to the Future and our asses flying around in cars. Hasn't happened yet either. But I want to thank you for joining us, and everybody else will be right back after these. Thank you for watching this episode of To The Point. As always, I'm your host, Eric Mitchell, and we thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, if you know someone that we should be interviewing on our show, or you'd like to be a guest on our show, feel free to email us at hello@tothepointtv.com. We'd love to have you as a guest on our show. Please go ahead and feel free to follow us on Twitter at To The Point TV. We'd love to see you on Twitter. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram. We're huge fans of Instagram here at To The Point. So give us a follow at To The Point, and a like and a share so you can see the guests that are coming up on IG. And that is at To The Point TV. It's not .com. It's just at To The Point TV. So confusing with all these names taken. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you know what we're going to get ready to go. But before you do that, if you're a fan of Facebook and you spend a lot of time on there, go give our Facebook page a like and a follow and share it with your friends. And keep in mind, if you can't get to your YouTube, you can always watch us live at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern weekdays. We appreciate to see you there. And as always, my favorite peeps, you're here on the YouTube, and we love you here on YouTube. So make sure that you drop in and you can see every episode and never miss an episode, right? Because if you smash that subscribe button, give it a like, and flick that bell, you flick that bell, you get notified before everyone else when we drop the latest episode or subscription. And as a reminder, all of our segments and shows go live weekdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, so you will be the first to catch them, and you don't want to miss them. Go check out our library. They are broken down by hashtags, so you will never miss an episode. On behalf of our entire team here at To The Point, we want to thank you for tuning in, because if it wasn't for viewers like you, we wouldn't have a show. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Eric Mitchell. Be safe, be strong, be smart, and God bless America.
Let's get to the point.